The next technique we're going to go over is factoring by grouping. Now, you're going to want to use this technique in a very specific situation. Polynomials with exactly 4 terms can sometimes be factored by grouping terms. The trick is to rearrange the terms if necessary and group the terms so that each group has a common factor. All right, so what you should take away from that, okay, is that we're going to use factoring by grouping when there are exactly 4 terms in your polynomial, okay? So let's go ahead and try this technique out, okay? So in example 2, we have 2 different polynomials and we're going to factor both by grouping, okay? Now, you are not always going to be told, hey, factor this polynomial by grouping. But if you look at the polynomial in example A here, it's x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x plus 6. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So that should tell you or ring a bell in your head that, hey, let me try grouping. Okay, so how grouping works is you're going to basically pair up the terms, okay? So, the way you want to pair them, you can just start out like put the first 2 terms together and then put the second 2 terms together. You want to pair them up so that each pair has something in common, okay? You may have to rearrange the order, okay? If you do that, make sure, you keep the appropriate sign. Like the x cubed always has to be positive, the 2x squared always has to be negative, the 3x always has to be negative, the 6 always has to be positive, okay? Keep that in mind if you do have to reorder the terms. I'm just going to keep it simple here. I'm going to pair up the first 2 terms and I'm going to pair up the second 2 terms, okay? So I'm going to concentrate on x cubed minus 2x squared. Okay, I'm going to completely ignore the negative 3x plus 6. Okay, so when I look at this first pair here, okay, what's common to both pieces? Well, I see an x squared in common. Okay, I spent example 1 breaking down things all the way. Okay, so I'm not going to do that anymore. But if you need to go back and rewrite it as x times x times x minus 2 times x, then go ahead and do that, okay? But hopefully, you'll practice enough, you'll get to the point that you can look at this and say, hey, x squared is what's in common, okay? And so if I take that out, that is going to leave me with x minus 2, okay? I'll go ahead and just write it right here in case you didn't see it. So it's x times x minus 2 times x, okay? So that meant that our common factor here was going to be x times x, okay? And then once we took that out, the x squared, it left us with x minus 2, okay? So that is solely for the first pair, okay? Then you have to go and do the same thing to the second pair of terms, okay? So now we're going to concentrate on negative 3x plus 6. We're going to totally ignore the x cubed minus 2x squared. All right, so cover up x cubed minus 2x squared if you need to. Concentrate solely on negative 3x plus 6. Negative 3x plus 6 is in standard form. Okay, I've got x to the first power, and then the 6 has no x's, okay? The number is negative, okay? So I need to take out a negative number, okay? Notice you cannot take out an x because the 3x has an x, but the 6 does not, okay? So if you notice the 3 versus the 6, both of these numbers are divisible by 3, so I'm going to take out a 3, okay? And I'm actually taking out negative 3, okay? Negative because the leading term is negative, okay? So if I write what's left, okay, what is that going to give me? Okay, well, if I do that down here, I've got negative 3 times x plus 6. 6 is the same thing as 3 times 2, if you want to do it that way. That's what we're dealing with here. But if you concentrate on this piece right here, okay, I took out the negative 3. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1, and there's an x left, okay? And then if I move on to the other piece, positive 6, okay, divided by negative 3, what I took out, that's going to be negative 2. Okay, so that's what's left. Okay, so this is how it's going to look. I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. Okay, so 1 times x is x. Okay, so that's where I am at this point. Okay, I'm not done. Okay, but this is how far I've gotten. Okay, I paired up each. I took the original 4 terms, I paired them up. Okay, and then for each pair, I took out the common factor. Okay, like I said, I'm not done. Where do I go from here? Well, at this step, what you should notice is you have something common popping up. Okay, this is a unit, this is a unit, and they're separated by the subtraction sign. On either side, or each unit contains an x minus 2. Okay, so that's common. That's a common factor to both units. And I'm next going to take that out. Okay, so now I'm going to take out the x minus 2 from both parts. Okay, that's my common factor. I need to write what's left in parentheses. So if I take out the x minus 2 from the first term, that's going to leave me with x squared. And then if I take out the x minus 2 from the second piece, that's going to leave me with minus 3. Okay, there I am. I have rewritten this thing as something times something. So I am done. Okay, I have factored my polynomial. Okay, there's your answer. All right, moving on to part B. Okay, we're going to factor by grouping again because this has 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Okay, again, we've got x and y, and that's okay. They're just different variables. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pair them up, just the first 2 together, the second 2 together. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and concentrate on my first pair, the x times y plus 5 times x. Okay, if you need to go to the side and break it down, this is x times y plus 5 times x. When I look at this, I see that there's an x common to both pieces. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take that out as my common factor. Okay, and then write your parentheses, write what's left. That's going to give me y plus 5. Okay, remember, if you do check yourself, and you should check yourself along the way, if you multiplied it back out, you would get x times y. Positive times positive is positive. X times 5 is 5x. Okay, so that's what you started with. Okay, so that's the first pair. Okay, now we're going to move on to the second pair, which is positive 3y plus 15. Okay, so that's 3 times y plus 15. Okay, if we're just looking here at the numbers, okay, you're going to have to factor out a number because the first term has a y, but the second term does not, or this has a y, but this does not. Okay, so you're going to have to factor out only a number. You won't be able to factor out a y. Okay, both 3 and 15 are divisible by 3. So if I rewrite 15, that's 3 times 5. Okay, if you're thinking about it that way. So this is right here. This is 3 times y plus 15. All right, so this time, if you're just looking at this, okay, the leading term is positive. So you do not need to take out a negative. You're going to take out a positive number. Okay, so what you're going to do here is you're going to look at what's in common. Okay, if I look at my common stuff here, okay, there's a 3 in common. It's on both sides, okay, of this piece and this piece. Okay, the 3 is what's in common. So that's what I'm taking out. Okay, so my common factor for this pair is going to be 3. Okay, if I take the common factor out, okay, what's going to be left? Open your parentheses, write what's left. You're going to have y plus 5. Okay, so again, we started with 4 terms. We paired up we made two pairs, okay, of two terms each. We went to each pair, took out the common factor, and wrote what's left, okay? And that's where we are right now. We're not done, okay? Before I move on, I want to make sure you understand this plus sign right here is absolutely necessary, okay? Let me kind of color code this here. This plus sign is this plus sign, okay? Those two pieces, the two pairs, are attached by that plus sign, okay? If you didn't have it there, it would be a bunch of stuff multiplied together and it would not come out right, okay? Remember, when you get to the end, you really should check yourself to make sure that everything multiplies out to be the original, okay? All right, so here we go. This is where we are. We're left at this stage, okay? It's basically now we've got this unit plus this unit. And when you look at it, the reason that factoring by grouping works, when you pair up you put them in pairs and you take out what's common, that causes at this step, that causes you to see something in common. On both sides of this blue plus sign, I see this y plus 5 in parentheses. It is now a common factor, and you can take that out in the next step, okay? So it's got to stay in parentheses. Otherwise, the distribution or the multiplication won't be done correctly. So it has to come out. So we are going to go ahead and write what's left in parentheses. Okay, so the y plus 5 comes out. It's going to leave me with x. And then on the right side, well, we're going to go ahead and write that blue plus sign. Okay, and then on the other side, we take out the y plus 5, and we're going to be left with 3. Okay, we are done. This is our factorization. Okay, we rewrote the original as something times something. Okay, I didn't do it on the last one, but I'm going to go ahead and check my answer here so you can see it. It's always a great idea to check yourself when factoring, especially if you're not great at it. Okay. When you multiply this out, you would have to FOIL it. Okay. And FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, last. That's how I learned it. And I promise you I'm much older than you. But what I've kind of grown into is I've kind of moved away from foiling, and I've used something called the box method when I'm multiplying something out. So what you do is you take the first piece and just write it down. They're both positive, so it's positive y, positive 5. I make a column, and then I make a row, positive x, positive 3. Okay, if anybody was negative, you would use the negative sign with it. Okay, and then I'm going to make a box, and I'm going to kind of divide this up into smaller boxes like this. Okay, and then I'm going to take each pair and multiply together. Okay, so watch. This first box right here, that's going to be x times y. That's also the same thing as y times x. When you multiply, you can multiply in any order. Okay, and then if I do y times 3, that's 3y. And then if I do the 5 times x, that's going to go in this box, 5 times x. And then if I do 5 times 3, that's going to give me 15. Okay, so that's what I get if I multiply all this stuff out. And all of these things in the box, all these pieces in the box, that's what you get if you multiply our factorization out. So if you just write it down, you're going to get x times y plus 3 times y plus 5 times x plus 15. Okay, if you go back to the original, that's exactly what we have. We're adding all these pieces together. So when you add, you can add in any order. 1 plus 2 is the same thing as 2 plus 1. So I can actually switch this. Okay, this is exactly what we started with. So we know we are right. Okay, so these two examples show you how to do factor by grouping. So just to recap, you want to use this method when you have exactly 4 terms. You're going to pair up your terms. You're going to put them in groups of 2. You're going to go to each pair. You're going to take out what's in common. Okay, and once you do that, that is going to bring you to a step where you have something in common in parentheses, and you're going to take out that quantity in parentheses, and then you're going to write what's left in parentheses, and then you will have factored the polynomial. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next technique.